Do we need to help supply pork for China? What China wants, they seem to get, but the real question is, will Millard County go along? What we know about China versus the U.S. China's population is about 1.5 billion people, where the U.S. population is 1/4 of that, or about 330 million. Their primary meat source is pork. China cannot grow enough hogs for their needs and doesn't really want to. They get the pork, we get the waste problems. China needs hogs from the U.S. to feed their people. China bought our largest hog producers, Smithfield Farms, and paid a 30% premium. When China wants something, money is not an obstacle. China's prime mode of operation is bribery and using our freedom and laws to their advantage. Neighbors be damned. U.S. politicians are highly susceptible to bribery, and enough attorneys are for sale for any purpose, and China knows that money talks. What does it mean to be American? We first think of freedom, our Constitution, we the people. Many of us sacrifice riches, influence, and status, and even drive more to live in a rural environment with more freedom from government intrusion and societal disruptions like crime, traffic, and air pollution. The rural family lifestyle is unique and of great value to many of us. Being a good neighbor is a cherished rural farm value that we all share. This is a story of a rural farmer lured into being a pig farmer, but later closed down his operation because of its impact on his neighbors.
Former pig factory farm owner Don Webb.
I shut my hog operation down and I got out, and I just couldn't do another person that way to make them smell that. It is a cesspool that you put feces and urine in, a hole in the ground that you dump a toxic waste in. And I've seen dead hogs in them and stuff like that. I've seen it. I've talked to the people. I've seen the little children that say, Mom and Daddy, why we got to smell this stuff? You get stories like, I can't hang my clothes out. Feces and urine odor comes by and attaches itself to your clothes. And then people will say, we're scared to invite neighbors.
So that's former pig factory farmer Don Webb, who closed his farm.
Ultimately, our free agency, or our right to choose, is expressed in our right to vote on things that affect our lives. If you're a registered voter, help get this issue on the ballot so everyone's opinion can be expressed equally. Otherwise, China will buy Millard County to grow their hogs. Normal farming versus industrial farming. Normal farmers choose how to run their farm. Smithfield has their way to farm and allows little to no farmer input. Normal farmers operate on a slim margin, and Smithfield makes it harder as they soak up many resources, thus raising prices farmers pay for supplies. Good old supply and demand. Farmers take pride in caring for their land and their animals, and being a good neighbor, where Smithfield cares little about all that. They only want the pork sent to China, period. Should Smithfield really even be called a farmer? Should we treat them as we do our cherished existing normal farmers? Aren't they really wolves in sheep's clothing? When a farmer partners with Smithfield, they might wear the same hat, but sadly they're leaving the farmer's fold, which they have every right to do. China's overall U.S. hog strategy. China's highest goal is to have one set of rules for industrial hog operations throughout the entire United States. This limits the politicians that need to be paid off, and they are very experienced and good at doing this. If they can't get that, then they want each state to set their own very similar rules. Their worst case is to have to deal with individual counties and municipalities and their citizens who can and will vote. What rules would be ideal for China in the U.S.? They seem willing to accept there being no industrial hog farms within 2 miles of municipalities. Individual homeowners, however, are not even considered. The number of hogs per farm is not too important because they just put in more smaller farms if they had to. Bigger is better, though. Hog farms need electricity and want to be near good roads for their transportation needs, as many hogs need to be moved by truck. They want no odor or pollution restrictions. After all, they are just farming, and by government definition, farms have unavoidable odors. Why doesn't China just buy out the farms it wants? Some farmers will sell, but most have had their land and their families for generations. They like their freedom and won't sell out. China found that the best workers/managers are those with some sort of ownership and skin in the game. Whenever China wants, they can take the farmer's property anytime and have done so. This is basically how it's done. Smithfield owns the hogs, so they control hog delivery. If a farmer needs 2 cycles per year to break even, then Smithfield holds back 1 cycle for any reason. The farmer becomes delinquent, being paid for only 1 cycle. Smithfield comes to the rescue, takes the farmer's equity for the missed payment, and keeps the farmer on as a manager, but not as the owner of the land anymore. Smithfield now owns it. County versus state versus Fed controls. The closer government is to the people, the more likely the people's needs will be addressed by voting rather than by lobbying with big money. Counties need to address precedent cases much less often than states and the feds do. We're talking about a situation where certain rules apply in Iowa, for example, and now Smithfield wonders why those rules are not good enough for Millard County. Feds would have to explain why Iowa's rules are not good enough for every other state. Even states feel an obligation to give strong consideration to what other states do, and lawyers and lobbyists press this issue vigorously. What is Utah's inclination relative to industrial farming? A previous hog farmer from Tremonton, Scott Sandell, recently introduced a bill, then pulled it temporarily, that would withdraw all county and municipality involvement in the siting of industrial hog farms. Utah is inclined to seriously consider only a 2-mile municipality setback statewide. Again, individuals outside the 2-mile limit are not even being considered. The state knows about our petition drive and is taking a wait-and-see position before they either proceed or drop their plans. We hold the keys to our destiny. What's it like living next to an industrial hog operation? All states now give farmers a basic right to farm, without the fear of lawsuits brought by offended neighbors. As one judge remarked while dismissing a lawsuit against a hog farmer, pork production generates odors which cannot be prevented, and so long as the human race consumes pork, someone must tolerate the smell. Here's a case showing the operation of industrial hog farms in North Carolina.
Now, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. We're broadcasting today from Tampa, Florida, from Tampa PBS, WEDU. I'm Amy Goodman. We close today's show with a look at the battle between residents of eastern North Carolina and one of the state's largest industries, hog farms. Last week, the North Carolina lawmakers passed House Bill 467, which limits the damages that residents can collect against hog farms. The billion-dollar industry is primarily clustered in the eastern part of North Carolina, where hog farms collect billions of gallons of untreated pig feces and urine in what are essentially cesspools, then dispose of the waste by spraying it into the air. In an investigation into the industry, filmmaker Mark DeVries used drones to capture aerial footage of several massive facilities that supply pigs for Smithfield Foods. He spoke with Steve Wing, Associate Professor of Epidemiology at the University of North Carolina's Giddings School of Public Health, who described what happens in the facilities.
The waste falls through the floors. It's flushed out into an open pit, like a cesspool. It's easy for a big hog operation to have as much waste as a medium-sized city. Of course, the pit will fill up, so it has to be emptied, and they're emptied by spraying the liquid waste.
Yes, you heard that right.
If you're familiar with a garden sprayer, they're gigantic versions of that. So they're making droplets, fine mists out of this liquid waste, and that can drift downwind into the neighboring communities.
Residents living in the area of the spray complain of odors so bad it limits their ability to be outdoors and adverse health effects. House Bill 467, or the Agriculture and Forestry Nuisance Remedies Bill, was introduced by Republican State Representative Jimmy Dixon, a longtime farmer who's received campaign contributions from the hog industry. Speaking at a hearing about the legislation, Dixon said, quote, "These claims are at best enormous exaggerations and at worst outright lies. Is there some odor? Yes. But I would like you to close your eyes and imagine how ham and sausage and eggs and fried chicken smell," he said. The legislation comes as a class action suit brought by nearly 500 primarily African-American residents of eastern North Carolina seek financial compensation from Murphy Brown, the state's largest hog producer. The lawsuits have now moved to federal court.
This next video shows a facility and how they mistreat the animals in a most inhumane way.
What we found are extraordinarily inhumane conditions at Smithfield Foods, the largest pork producer in the entire world. I still remember the first time I ever laid eyes on a gestation crate facility and seeing the helplessness of these animals who have done nothing to deserve the fate that they're enduring. Suffering inside of these crates is just absolutely devastating. The Humane Society of the United States has investigated one of Smithfield's breeding operations. This facility represents what gestation crate confinement is. Open wounds, pressure sores, infections, bleeding gums from biting the bars so much, and these animals aren't even being cared for with individualized veterinary attention. Regardless of how the system is managed, these pigs are barely able to move even an inch their entire lives. They're unable to walk around, to turn around. It causes them to quite literally go insane. And this this is one of the reasons why so many animal scientists and veterinarians have condemned this extreme confinement practice.
Smithfield, about, I would say, 3 weeks ago, made an announcement that we had made a decision to phase out the use of sow gestation crates in all of our company-owned farms over a 10-year period.
Smithfield committed publicly to phasing out gestation crates within a 10-year period, receiving a lot of public praise for doing so. Now, just a couple years later, the company is saying that it no longer can meet its own very generous self-imposed deadline. That's completely unacceptable. Many other pork companies, such as, let's say, Maxwell Foods, which is one of the biggest pork producers in the country, is already 100% gestation crate-free. Cargill, another major pork producer, is already 50% gestation crate-free. The American Farm Bureau, the primary agribusiness lobby in the United States, funded a poll in which they found that an overwhelming majority of Americans find gestation crates to be inhumane. This is one of the reasons why 7 states in the country have already banned this practice, why all 27 member nations of the EU have banned the practice. Gestation crates are a practice of the past, not of the future, and Smithfield ought to be speeding up that trend rather than slowing it down.
There are health issues related to industrial hog farming, CAFOs. Populations living in North Carolina counties with large hog farms, greater than 100,000 pigs, have higher risks for ER visits, hospitalization, and death from various diseases, as compared to people living in counties without registered hog farms. Hog farms versus a neighbor's health. Patients at VA hospitals in Iowa were 3 times more likely to carry the superbug MRSA if they lived within 1 mile of an industrial hog farm. There's infections associated with CAFOs. Residents living near the hog operations have an increased occurrence of diarrhea. Pigs may be involved in the next generation of swine flu pandemic. Brucellosis has been reported in pork packing plants after nearly successful eradication in the United States. Since 1968, adult meningitis, which is very contagious, has been recognized as an occupational disease in swine operations. The possibility of zoonotic transmission of hepatitis E virus between swine and humans is being explored. Respiratory diseases associated with CAFOs. Mixtures of ammonia, hydrogen sulfide, volatile organic compounds, dust, and endotoxins may cause respiratory dysfunction in workers at hog farms and possibly in nearby residents. Hog odor and hydrogen sulfide were found to be associated with upper respiratory systems. This is interesting. A North Carolina study found that a 23% higher prevalence of asthma symptoms among children attending schools where just the staff noticed CAFO odors indoors, even just twice a month or more. There's other diseases too. Higher rates of stroke mortality in the white population of North Carolina in 1962 to 1982, over 20 years, in the areas which have large hog farms. Stress from hog farms' odor was associated with a short-term increase of blood pressure. Slurry ponds for collecting pig excrements can contaminate the soil and groundwater with high levels of zinc, which inhibits copper and iron absorption when ingested by humans, leading to anemia and kidney function damage. Children are particularly susceptible to neurological effects. The pork industry was panicked after a $50 million fine over pig farming pollution. But, as you might expect, this fine was later substantially reduced. North Carolinians who live near large hog farms, known as concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFOs, have higher death rates from a variety of causes than comparable state residents who live further away from such facilities. What can we do? Stopping all industrial hog farms at the Millard County door is by far the best strategy. We've probably all heard about the camel's nose under the tent. If the camel's nose is under the tent, the rest of the stinky camel will follow. There's another connotation to this story. The camel first puts his head under the tent, implying there might be some underhanded dealings going on between officials in Smithfield to at least allow one small industrial hog farm. Of course, Smithfield's intention all along is for the camel to get all the way inside the tent. The Arab, which thought having the camel's nose in the tent would not be much of a problem, after the camel gets all the way in, realizes there's no room for him in the tent. If ever allowed in, Smithfield, China, will use all means to soften and fight any restrictions on their operations. China has more money than Millard County. Millard County can show Smithfield that our resistance is high, so they should find easier venues. We must resist the state's control of this issue, so we need to contact our state representatives. The freedom to farm is no more important than the freedom to vote in the United States. Help get this initiative on the ballot. If you don't like CAFOs, sell as soon as this initiative fails, if it does. Nobody will knowingly buy your house to live next to an industrial hog farm, even if it's just sometime in the future. Let's see where these hog farms might be located in Millard County. The map on the left represents about a third of the area of Millard County. The gray parts are private land. Yellow, green, and blue are government lands with no farming allowed. The circles around the cities represent the 2-mile limit that would be agreed to by the state. So every piece of gray on the map outside of a blue circle would be eligible to have an industrial hog farm on it. Smithfield has plans for 3 million hogs in Millard County. If you look at the slightly smaller part of the map around Delta, you'll see some of the cities again have their 2-mile protection, but there's substantial gray area around those cities where hog farms could be placed anywhere and everywhere. Even Scipio could be hog heaven because there's plenty of gray land outside the 2-mile radius. On at least 3 sides there could be hog farms, which would just destroy the Scipio lifestyle. Smithfield must be stopped. I appreciate you listening to this and any help that you can give to save the way we live. Thank you for watching.